This notion of fanatical consistency relative to the hedgehog concept doesn't just concern the portfolio of strategic activities. It can also relate to the entire way you manage and build an organization. Nucor built its success around the hedgehog concept of harnessing culture and technology to produce steel. Central to Nucor's concept was the idea of aligning worker interests with management and shareholder interests in an egalitarian meritocracy largely devoid of class distinctions. Wrote Ken Iverson in his 1998 book Plain Talk, "Inequality still runs rampant in most corporations. I'm referring now to the hierarchical inequality which legitimizes and institutionalizes the principle of we versus they. The people at the top of corporate hierarchy grant themselves privilege after privilege, flaunt those privileges before the men and women who do the real work, then wonder why employees are unmoved by management's invocations to cut costs and boost profitability. When I think of the millions of dollars spent by people at the top of the management hierarchy on efforts to motivate people who are continually put down by that hierarchy, I can only shake my head in wonder." When we interviewed Ken Iverson, he told us that nearly 100% of the success of Nucor was due to its ability to translate its simple concept into disciplined action consistent with that concept. Nucor grew into a $3.5 billion Fortune 500 company with only 4 layers of management and a corporate headquarters staff of fewer than 25 people. Executive, financial, secretarial, the whole shebang, crammed into a rented office space the size of a small dental practice. Cheap veneer furniture adorned the lobby, which in itself was not much larger than a closet. Instead of a corporate dining room, executives hosted visiting dignitaries at Phil's Diner, a strip mall sandwich shop across the street. Nucor executives did not receive better benefits than frontline workers. In fact, executives had fewer perks. For example, all workers, but not executives, were eligible to receive $2,000 per year for each child up to 4 years of post-high school education. In one incident, a man came to Marvin Pullman and said, "I have 9 kids. Are you telling me that you'll pay for 4 years of school, college, trade school, whatever, for every single one of my kids?" Pullman acknowledged that yes, that's exactly what would happen. "The man just sat there and cried," said Pullman. "I'll never forget it. It just captures, in one moment, so much of what we were trying to do." When Nucor had a highly profitable year, everyone in the company would have a very profitable year. Nucor workers became so well paid that one woman told her husband, "You get fired from Nucor, I'll divorce you." But when Nucor faced difficult times, everyone from top to bottom suffered. But people at the top suffered more. In the 1982 recession, for example, worker pay went down 25%, officer pay went down 60%, and the CEO's pay went down 75%. To further be consistent with its hedgehog concept, Nucor took extraordinary steps to keep at bay the class distinctions that eventually encroach on most organizations. All 7,000 employees' names appeared in the annual report, not just officers and executives. Just go back and revisit that for a moment. All 7,000 employees' names appeared in the annual report. Everyone except safety supervisors and visitors wore the same color hard hats. Now, the color of hard hats might sound trivial, but it caused quite a stir. Some foremen complained that special colored hard hats identified them as higher in the chain, an important status symbol that they could put on the back shelves of their cars or trucks. Nucor responded by organizing a series of forums to address the point that your status and authority at Nucor come from your leadership capabilities, not your position, and not from the color of your hard hat. If you don't like it, if you really feel you need that class distinction, well, then Nucor is just not the right place for you. To highlight how consistent and extreme, how much cottage cheese Nucor rinsed, let's contrast Nucor to another steel company, the comparison Bethlehem. In contrast to Nucor's dental suite-size headquarters, Bethlehem Steel built a 21-story office complex to house its executive staff. At extra expense, it designed the building more like a cross than a rectangle. And why would you do this? Well, it was a design that accommodated the large numbers of vice presidents who needed corner offices. The vice presidents had to have windows in two directions. So it was out of that desire that we came up with the design, explained a Bethlehem executive. In his book, Crisis in Bethlehem, John Strohmeyer details a culture as far to the other end of the continuum from Nucor as you could possibly imagine. He describes a fleet of corporate aircraft, used even for taking executives' children to college, and flitting away to weekend hideaways. He describes a world-class 18-hole executive golf course, an executive country club renovated with Bethlehem corporate funds, and even how executive rank determined shower priority at the club. We came to the conclusion, in fact, that Bethlehem executives saw the very purpose of their activities as the perpetuation of a class system that elevated them to elite status. Bethlehem did not decline in the 1970s and 80s primarily because of imports or technology. That's what everybody would think caused the decline, but no. Bethlehem declined first and foremost because it was a culture wherein people focused their efforts on negotiating the nuances of an intricate social hierarchy, rather than focusing on customers, competitors, or changes in the external world. From 1966, at the start of its buildup, to 1999, Nucor posted 34 consecutive years of positive profitability. While over those same 34 years, Bethlehem Steel lost money 12 times, and its total cumulative profitability added up to less than zero. Total net income over 34 years, if you added up every year of profits, was less than zero. By the 1990s, Nucor's profitability beat Bethlehem's every single year. And at the end of the century, Nucor, which had been less than a third the size of Bethlehem only a decade earlier, finally surpassed Bethlehem in total revenues. Even more astounding, Nucor's average 5-year profit per employee exceeded Bethlehem by almost 10 times. And for the investor, $1 invested in Nucor beat $1 invested in Bethlehem Steel by over 200 times. To be fair, Bethlehem had one giant problem not faced by Nucor: adversarial labor relations and entrenched unions. Nucor had no union and enjoyed remarkably good relations with its workers. In fact, when union organizers visited one plant, workers felt so ferociously loyal to Nucor that management had to protect the union organizers from workers who began shouting and throwing sand at them. But the union argument begs a crucial question. Why did Nucor have such a better relationship with its workers in the first place? Why? Because Ken Iverson and his team had a simple crystalline hedgehog concept. And that hedgehog concept was about aligning worker interests with management interests. And most important, because they were willing to go to almost extreme lengths to build the entire enterprise consistent with that concept, they rinsed their cottage cheese. Call them a bit fanatical if you want. But to create great results requires a nearly fanatical dedication to the idea of consistency, super consistency, with the hedgehog concept. The stop doing list. Do you have a to-do list? Most of us do. I imagine you do. Now, do you also have a stop doing list? Most of us lead busy but undisciplined lives. We have ever-expanding to-do lists, trying to build momentum by doing, and then doing more. It rarely works. Those who built the good to great companies, however, made as much use of stop doing lists. They displayed a remarkable discipline to unplug all sorts of extraneous junk. When Darwin Smith became CEO of Kimberly-Clark, he made great use of stop-doing lists. He saw that playing the annual forecast game with Wall Street focused people too much on the short term, so he just stopped doing it. On balance, I see no net advantage to our stockholders when we annually forecast future earnings, said Smith. We will not do it. He saw title creep as a sign of class consciousness and bureaucratic layering, so he simply unplugged titles. No one at the company would have a title, unless it was for a position where the outside world demanded a title. He saw increasing layers as the natural result of empire building, so he simply unplugged a huge stack of layers with a simple, elegant mechanism. If you couldn't justify to your peers the need for at least 15 people reporting to you to fulfill your responsibilities, then you would have 0 people reporting to you. Keep in mind, he did this in the 1970s, long before such actions became fashionable. To reinforce the idea that Kimberly-Clark should begin thinking of itself as a consumer company, not a paper company, he unplugged Kimberly from all paper industry trade associations. The Good to Great companies institutionalized the discipline of stop doing through the use of a unique budget mechanism. Now stop and think about this for a minute. What's the purpose of having a budget? Most answer that budgeting exists to decide how much to apportion to each activity, or to manage costs, or both. From a good to great perspective, both of these answers are wrong. In a good to great transformation, budgeting is a discipline of a peculiar type, a discipline to decide which arenas should be fully funded and which should not be funded at all. In other words, the budget process is not about figuring out how much each activity gets, but about determining which activities best support the hedgehog concept and should be fully strengthened, and which should be eliminated entirely. Go back to Darwin Smith selling the mills. Kimberly-Clark didn't just reallocate resources from the paper business to the consumer business. It completely eliminated the paper business, sold the mills, and invested all the money into the emerging consumer business. I had an interesting conversation with some executives from a company in the paper business. It's a good company, not yet a great one, and they had competed at one point directly with Kimberly-Clark before Kimberly transformed itself into a consumer company. Out of curiosity, I asked what they thought of Kimberly-Clark. They looked at me and then said, "What Kimberly did is not fair." Not fair? I looked quizzical. Oh, sure, they've become a much more successful company. But if we'd sold our paper business and become a powerful consumer company, we could have been great too. But we just have too much invested in it, and we couldn't have brought ourselves to do it. If you look back at the good to great companies, they displayed remarkable courage to channel their resources into only one or a few arenas. Once they understood their 3 circles, they rarely hedged their bets. Recall Kroger's commitment to overturn its entire system to create superstores, while A&P clung to the safety of its older stores. Recall Abbott's commitment to put the bulk of its resources into becoming number 1 in diagnostics and hospital nutritionals, while Upjohn clung to the safety of its core pharmaceutical business, where, unfortunately, it could never be the best in the world. Recall how Walgreens exited the profitable food service business and focused all its might into one idea: the best, most convenient drugstores. Recall Gillette and Sensor, Nucor and the mini mills, Kimberly-Clark and selling the mills to channel all its resources into the consumer business. They all had the guts to make huge investments once they understood their hedgehog concept. The most effective investment strategy is a highly undiversified portfolio where you are right. As facetious as that sounds, that's essentially the approach the good to great companies took. Being right means getting the hedgehog concept. Highly undiversified means investing fully in those things that fit squarely within the 3 circles and getting rid of everything else. Of course, the key here is a little caveat. When you are right. But how do you know when you are right? In studying the companies, we learned that being right just isn't that hard if you have all the pieces in place. If you have level 5 leaders who get the right people on the bus. If you confront the brutal facts of reality. If you create a climate where the truth is heard. If you have a council. If you work within the 3 circles. If you frame all decisions in the context of a crystalline hedgehog concept, if you act from understanding, not bravado, if you do all of these things, then you are likely to be right on the big decisions. The real question is, once you know the right thing, do you have the discipline to do the right thing? And equally important, to stop doing the wrong things. Chapter Summary: A Culture of Discipline. Sustained great results depend upon building a culture full of self-disciplined people who take disciplined action, fanatically consistent with the 3 circles of the hedgehog concept. Bureaucratic cultures arise to compensate for incompetence and lack of discipline, which arise from having the wrong people on the bus in the first place. If you get the right people on the bus and the wrong people off the bus, you don't need stultifying bureaucracy. A culture of discipline involves a duality. On the one hand, it requires people who adhere to a consistent system. Yet, on the other hand, it gives people freedom and responsibility within the framework of that system. A culture of discipline is not just about action. It is about getting disciplined people who engage in disciplined thought and who then take disciplined action. The good to great companies appear boring and pedestrian looking in from the outside. But upon closer inspection, they're full of people who display extreme diligence and a stunning intensity. They rinse their cottage cheese. Do not confuse a culture of discipline with a tyrant who disciplines. They are very different concepts. One highly functional, the culture of discipline. The other highly dysfunctional, the tyrannical disciplinarian. Savior CEOs who personally discipline through sheer force of personality usually fail to produce sustained results. The single most important discipline for sustained results is fanatical adherence to the hedgehog concept and the willingness to shun opportunities that fall outside the 3 circles. A few unexpected findings. The more an organization has the discipline to stay within its 3 circles with almost religious consistency, the more it will have opportunities for growth. The fact that something is a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity is irrelevant. It's irrelevant unless it fits within the 3 circles. A great company will have many once-in-a-lifetime opportunities. Another form of Packard's Law. A great company is more likely to die of indigestion of too much opportunity than starvation from too little. The purpose of budgeting in a good to great company is not to decide how much each activity gets, but to decide which arenas best fit with the hedgehog concept and should be fully funded, and which should not be funded at all. And finally, my personal favorite from the whole chapter, stop doing lists are more important than to-do lists. I will leave it up to you to resolve the existential dilemma about whether to put start a stop doing list on your to-do list. Chapter 7: Technology Accelerators. Most men would rather die than think. Many do. Bertrand Russell. On July 28, 1999, Drugstore.com, one of the first internet pharmacies, sold shares of its stock to the public. Within seconds of the opening bell, the stock multiplied nearly threefold to $65 a share. 4 weeks later, the stock closed as high as $69, creating a market valuation of over $3.5 billion. Not bad for an enterprise that had sold products for less than 9 months, had fewer than 500 employees, offered no hope of investor dividends for years, if not decades, and deliberately planned to lose hundreds of millions of dollars before turning a single dollar of profit. What rationale did people use to justify these rather extraordinary numbers? New technology will change everything, the logic went. The internet is going to completely revolutionize all businesses, the gurus chanted. It's the great internet land grab. Be there first, be there fast, build market share, no matter how expensive, and you win, yelled the entrepreneurs. We entered a remarkable moment in history when the whole idea of trying to build a great company seemed, well, quaint and outdated. Built to flip rather than built to last became the mantra of the day. Just tell people you were doing something, anything, connected with the internet, and presto, you became rich by flipping shares to the public, even if you had no profits or even a real company. Why take all the hard steps to go from build-up to breakthrough, creating a model that actually works when you could yell, new technology, or yell, new economy, and convince people to give you hundreds of millions of dollars? Some entrepreneurs didn't even bother to suggest that they would build a real company at all, much less a great one. One even filed to go public in March of 2000 with an enterprise that consisted solely of an informational website and a business plan. Nothing more. The entrepreneur admitted to the industry standard that it seemed strange to go public before starting a business, but that didn't stop him from trying to persuade investors to buy 1.1 million shares at $7 to $9 per share, despite having no revenues, no employees, no customers, no company. With the new technology of the internet, who needs all those archaic relics of the old economy? Or so the logic of the times went. At the high point of this frenzy, Drugstore.com issued its challenge to Walgreens. At first, Walgreens stock suffered from the invasion of the dot-coms, losing over 40% of its price in the months leading up to the Drugstore.com public offering. Wrote Forbes magazine in October 1999, investors seem to think that the web race will be won by competitors who hit the ground running. Companies like Drugstore.com, which trades at 398 times revenue. That's not 398 times profits, because there were no profits. 398 times revenue, rather than Walgreens, trading at 1.4 times revenue. Analysts downgraded Walgreens stock, and the pressure on Walgreens to react to the internet threat increased as nearly $15 billion in market value evaporated. Walgreens' response in the midst of this frenzy? We're a crawl, walk, run company, Dan Jornt told Forbes in describing his deliberate, methodical approach to the internet. Instead of reacting like Chicken Little, Walgreens executives did something quite unusual for the time. They decided to pause and reflect. They decided to use their brains. They decided to think. Slow at first, crawl, Walgreens began experimenting with a website while engaging in intense internal dialogue and debate about its implications, within the context of its own peculiar hedgehog. How will the internet connect to our convenience concept? How can we tie it to our economic denominator of profit per customer visit? How can we use the web to enhance what we do better than any other company in the world, and in a way that we're passionate about? Throughout, Walgreens executives embrace the Stockdale paradox. We have complete faith that we can prevail in an internet world as a great company. Yet, we must also confront the brutal facts of reality about the internet. One Walgreens executive told us a fun little story about this remarkable moment in history. An internet leader made a statement about Walgreens along the lines of, "Oh, Walgreens. They're too old and stodgy for the internet world. They'll be left behind." The Walgreens people, while irked by this arrogant comment from the internet elite, never seriously considered a public response. Said one executive, "Let's quietly go about doing what we need to do, and it'll become clear soon enough that they just pulled the tail of the wrong dog." Then a little faster, walk. Walgreens began to find ways to tie the internet directly to its sophisticated inventory and distribution model and ultimately its convenience concept. Fill your prescription online, pop into your car, and go to your local Walgreens drive-thru in whatever city you happen to be in at the moment. Zoom past the window with hardly a moment's pause, picking up your bottle of, well, whatever. Or have it shipped to you if that's more convenient. There was no manic lurching about, no hype, no bravado. Just calm, deliberate pursuit of understanding followed by calm, deliberate steps forward. Then finally, run. Walgreens bet big, launching an internet site as sophisticated and well-designed as most pure .coms. Just before writing this chapter in October of 2000, we went online to use Walgreens.com. We found it as easy to use, and the system of delivery largely as reliable and well thought out as Amazon.com, which was then the reigning champion of e-commerce. Precisely 1 year after the Forbes article, Walgreens had figured out how to harness the internet to accelerate momentum, making it just that much more unstoppable. It announced, on its website in fact, a significant increase in job openings to support its sustained growth. From its low point in 1999 at the depths of the dot-com scare, Walgreens stock nearly doubled within a year. And what of Drugstore.com? Continuing to accumulate massive losses, it announced a layoff to conserve cash. At its high point, little more than a year earlier, Drugstore.com traded at a price 26 times higher than at the time of this writing. It had lost nearly all of its initial value. While Walgreens went from crawl to walk to run, Drugstore.com went from run to walk to crawl. Perhaps Drugstore.com will figure out a sustainable model that works and become a great company, but it will not become great because of snazzy technology, internet hype, and an irrational stock market. It will only become a great company if it figures out how to apply technology to a coherent concept that reflects understanding of the three circles of a hedgehog concept. Now you might be thinking, but the internet frenzy is just a speculative bubble that burst. So what? Everyone knew that the bubble was unsustainable, that it just couldn't last. What does that teach us about good to great? To be clear, the point of this chapter has little to do with the specifics of the internet bubble per se. Bubbles come and bubbles go. It happened with the railroads. It happened with electricity. It happened with the radio. It happened with the personal computer. It happened with the internet. And it will happen again with unforeseen new technologies. Yet, throughout all of this change, great companies have adapted and endured. Indeed, most of the truly great companies of the last 100 years, from Walmart to Walgreens, from Procter & Gamble to Kimberly-Clark, from Merck to Abbott, trace their roots back through multiple generations of technology change, be it electricity, the television, or the internet. They've adapted before and emerged great. The best ones will adapt again. Technology-induced change, it's nothing new. The real question is not, what is the role of technology? Rather, the real question is, how do good to great organizations think differently about technology? Not what do they do, but what do they think? We could have predicted that Walgreens would eventually figure out the internet. The company had a history of making huge investments in technology long before other companies in its industry. In the early 1980s, it pioneered a massive network system called Intercom. The idea was simple. By linking all Walgreens stores electronically and sending customer data to a central source, it turned every Walgreens outlet in the country into a customer's local pharmacy. You live in Florida, but you're visiting Phoenix. You need to get a prescription refill. No problem. The Phoenix store is linked to the central system, and it's just like going down to your hometown Walgreens store. This might seem mundane by today's standards, but when Walgreens made the investment in Intercom in the late 1970s, no one else in the industry had anything like it. Eventually, Walgreens invested over $400 million in Intercom, including $100 million for its own satellite system. Touring the Intercom headquarters, dubbed Earth Station Walgreen, is like taking a trip through a NASA Space Center with its stunning array of sophisticated electronic gadgetry, wrote a trade journal. Walgreens' technical staff became skilled at maintaining every piece of technology rather than relying on outside specialists. And it didn't stop there. Walgreens pioneered the application of scanners, robotics, computerized inventory control, and advanced warehouse tracking systems. The internet, well, it's just one more step in a continuous pattern. Walgreens didn't adopt all of this advanced technology just for the sake of advanced technology or in fearful reaction to falling behind. No, it used technology as a tool to accelerate momentum after hitting breakthrough, and tied technology directly to its hedgehog concept of convenient drugstores increasing profit per customer visit. As an interesting aside, as technology became increasingly sophisticated in the late 1990s, Walgreens' CIO, Chief Information Officer, was a registered pharmacist by training, not a technology guru. Walgreens remained resolutely clear. Its hedgehog concept would drive its use of technology, not the other way around. The Walgreens case reflects a general pattern. In every good to great case, we did find technological sophistication. However, it was never technology per se, but the pioneering application of carefully selected technologies. Every good to great company became a pioneer in the application of technology, but the technologies themselves varied greatly. On page 150 of the hardcover edition of Good to Great, I have listed all of the pioneering applications of technologies that stand out in each of the Good to Great companies. Kroger, for example, was an early pioneer in the application of barcode scanners, which helped it accelerate past A&P by linking frontline purchases to backroom inventory management. This might not sound very exciting. Inventory management is not something that tends to rivet readers. But think of it this way. Imagine walking back into the warehouse and instead of seeing boxes of cereal and crates of apples, you see stacks and stacks of dollar bills. Hundreds of thousands and millions of freshly minted, crisp and crinkly dollar bills just sitting there on pallets, piled high to the ceiling. That's how you should think of inventory. Every single case of canned carrots is not just a case of canned carrots. It's cash. And it's cash just sitting there useless until you sell that case of canned carrots. Now recall how Kroger systematically shed its dreary old and small grocery stores, replacing them with nice, big, shiny superstores. To get this done required more than $9 billion of investment. Cash. $9 billion of cash that would somehow have to be pulled out of the low-margin grocery business. To put this in perspective, Kroger put more than twice its annual profits into capital expenditures on average every year for 30 years. Even more impressive, despite taking on $5.5 billion of junk bond debt to pay a one-time $40 per share cash dividend, plus an $8 debenture to fight off corporate raiders in 1988, Kroger continued its cash-intensive revamping throughout the 1980s and 1990s. Kroger modernized and turned over all its stores, improved the customer shopping experience, radically expanded the variety of products offered, and paid off billions of dollars in debt. Kroger's use of scanning technology To take hundreds of millions of crisp and crinkly dollar bills out of the warehouse and put them to better use became a key element in its ability to pull off its magic trick, pulling not one, not two, but 3 rabbits out of a hat. Gillette also became a pioneer in the application of technology. But Gillette's technology accelerators lay largely in manufacturing technology. Think about the technology required to make billions, literally billions, of low-cost, high-tolerance razor blades. When you and I pick up a Gillette razor, we expect the blade to be perfect, and we expect it to be inexpensive. For example, to create the sensor, Gillette invested over $200 million in design and development, most of it focused on manufacturing breakthroughs, and earned 29 patents. It pioneered the application of laser welding on a mass scale to shaving systems. It's a technology normally used for expensive and sophisticated products like heart pacemakers. The whole key to Gillette's shaving systems lay in manufacturing technology so unique, so proprietary that Gillette protected it the way Coca-Cola protects its secret formula, complete with armed guards and security clearances. Technology as an accelerator, not a creator of momentum. When Jim Johnson became chief executive of Fannie Mae following David Maxwell, he and his leadership team hired a consulting firm to conduct a technology audit. The lead consultant, Bill Kelvey, used a 4-level ranking, with 4 being cutting edge and 1 being stone age. Fannie Mae ranked only a 2. So, following the principle of first who, Kelvey was hired to move the company ahead. When Kelvey came to Fannie Mae in 1990, the company lagged about 10 years behind Wall Street in the use of technology. Over the next 5 years, Kelvey systematically took Fannie Mae from a 2 to a 3.8 on the 4-point ranking. He and his team created over 300 computer applications, including sophisticated analytical programs to control the $600 billion mortgage portfolio, online data warehouses covering 60 million properties, and streamlined workflows, significantly reducing paper and clerical effort. We moved technology out of the back office and harnessed it to transform every part of the business, said Kelvey. We created an expert system that lowers the cost of becoming a homeowner. Lenders using our technology reduced the loan approval time from 30 days to 30 minutes and lowered the associated costs by over $1,000 per loan. To date, when we wrote the book in year 2000, the system had saved homebuyers nearly $4 billion. Notice something. The Fannie Mae transition began in 1981 with the arrival of David Maxwell. Yet, the company lagged behind in the application of technology until the early 1990s, a decade later. Yes, technology became of prime importance to Fannie Mae, but only after it discovered its hedgehog concept and after it reached breakthrough. Technology was a key part of what Fannie Mae leaders called the second wind of the transformation and acted as an accelerating factor. The same pattern holds for Kroger, Gillette, Walgreens, in fact, all the good to great companies. The pioneering application of technology came late in the transition and never at the start. We get now to the punchline of this chapter. When used right, technology becomes an accelerator of momentum, not a creator of momentum. The good to great companies never began their transitions with pioneering technology, for the simple reason that you cannot make good use of technology until you know which technologies are relevant. And which are those? Those and only those that link directly to the 3 intersecting circles of the hedgehog concept. To make technology productive in a transformation from good to great means asking the following questions. Does the technology fit directly with your hedgehog concept? If yes, then you need to become a pioneer in the application of that technology. If no, Then ask, do you need this technology at all? If you need the technology at a base level, then all you need is parity. You don't necessarily need the world's most advanced phone system to be a great company. If the technology is irrelevant, then you can ignore it. We came to see the pioneering application of technology as just one more way in which the good to great companies remained disciplined within the frame of their hedgehog concept. Conceptually, their relationship to technology is no different from their relationship to any other category of decisions. Disciplined people who engage in disciplined thought and who then take disciplined action. If a technology doesn't fit squarely within the three circles, they ignore all the hype and fear and just go about their business with a remarkable degree of equanimity. However, once they understand which technologies are relevant, which technologies fit with the hedgehog, which technologies tie to the three circles, they became fanatical and creative in the application of those specific technologies. In the comparison companies, by contrast, we found only 3 cases of pioneering in the application of technology. Those 3 cases, Chrysler, Harris, and Rubbermaid, were all unsustained comparisons, which demonstrates that technology alone cannot create sustained great results. Chrysler, for instance, made superb use of advanced computer-aided and other design technologies, but it failed to link those technologies to a consistent hedgehog concept. As Chrysler strayed outside the three circles in the mid-1980s, from Gulfstream jets to Italian sports cars, no advanced technology by itself could save the company from another massive downturn. Technology without a clear hedgehog concept and without the discipline to stay in the three circles cannot make a company great. 2 incidents stood out in my mind as I wrote this chapter. The first is Time magazine's selection in 1999 of Albert Einstein as Person of the 20th Century. If you frame the Person of the Century selection around the question, how different would the world be today if that person had not existed? The choice of Einstein is perhaps surprising, compared to leaders like Churchill, Hitler, Stalin, and Gandhi. People who truly changed the course of human history, for better or worse. Physicists point out that the scientific community would have reached an understanding of relativity with or without Einstein. Perhaps 5 years later, certainly 10, but not 50. The Nazis never got the bomb, and the Allies would have won the Second World War without it, although it would have cost more Allied lives. So why did Time pick Einstein? In explaining their selection, Time editors wrote, "It's hard to compare the influence of statesmen with that of scientists. Nevertheless, we can note that there are certain eras that were most defined by their politics, others by their culture, and others by their scientific advances. So how will the 20th century be remembered? Yes, for democracy, and yes, for civil rights. But the 20th century will be most remembered for its earth-shaking advances in science and technology, which advanced the cause of freedom in some ways more than any statesman did. In a century that will be remembered foremost for its science and technology, one person stands out as the paramount icon of our age, Albert Einstein." The Time editors didn't pick the person of the century so much as they picked the theme of the century, technology and science, and attached the most famous person to it. Interestingly, just a few days before the Einstein announcement, Time announced its Person of the Year for 1999. Who did it pick? None other than the poster child of e-commerce, Jeff Bezos of Amazon.com, reflecting yet again our cultural obsession with technology-driven change. Let me be clear. I neither agree nor disagree with Time's choices. I simply find them interesting and illuminating because they give us a window into our modern psyche. Clearly, a key item on our collective mind is technology and its implication. Which brings me to a second incident. Taking a short break from the rigors of writing this book, I traveled to Minnesota to teach sessions at the Masters Forum. The Masters Forum has held executive seminars for nearly 15 years. I was curious to know which themes appeared repeatedly over those years. One of the consistent themes, said Jim Erickson and Patty Griffin, Jensen program directors, is technology, change, and the connection between the two. Why do you suppose that is, I asked. People don't know what they don't know, they said, and they're always afraid that some new technology is going to sneak up on them from behind, knock them on the head. They don't understand technology, and many fear it. All they know for sure is that technology is an important force and that they'd better pay attention to it. Given our culture's obsession with technology, and given the pioneering application of technology in the good to great companies, you might expect that technology would absorb a significant portion of the discussion in our interviews with the good to great executives. Well, you might expect that, and we did, but we were quite surprised to find the opposite. Fully 80% of the good to great executives we interviewed didn't even mention technology as one of the top 5 factors in the transition. Furthermore, in the cases where they did mention technology, it had a median ranking of 4th out of 5, with only 2 executives of 84 people we interviewed ranking at number 1. If technology is so vitally important, why did the good to great executives talk so little about it? Certainly not because they ignored technology. They were technologically sophisticated and, in fact, vastly superior to their comparisons. Furthermore, a number of the good to great companies received extensive media coverage and awards for their pioneering use of technology. Yet the executives themselves hardly talked about technology. It's as if the media articles and the executives were discussing 2 totally different sets of companies. Nucor, for example, became widely known as one of the most aggressive pioneers in the application of mini-mill steel manufacturing, with dozens of articles and 2 books that celebrated its bold investments in continuous thin slab casting and electric arc furnaces. Nucor became a cornerstone case at business schools as an example of unseating the old order through the advanced application of new technologies. But when we asked Ken Iverson, CEO of Nucor during its transition, to name the top 5 factors in the shift from good to great, where on the list do you think he put technology? First? Nope. Second? Nope. Third? Nope. Fourth? Not even. Fifth? Sorry, but no. The primary factors, said Ken Iverson, were the consistency of the company and our ability to project its philosophies throughout the whole organization, enabled by our lack of layers and bureaucracy. Stop and think about this for a minute. Here we have a consummate case study of upending the old order with new technology. That's what Nucor was known for. It's what it was taught about in business schools. And yet the chief executive, who made it happen, doesn't even list technology in the top 5 factors in the shift from good to great. This same pattern continued throughout the Nucor interviews. Of the 7 key executives and board members we interviewed, only 1 picked technology as the number 1 factor in the shift, and most focused on other factors. A few executives did talk about Nucor's big bets on technology somewhere in the interview, but they emphasized other factors even more. Getting people with that farmer work ethic on the bus, getting the right people in key management positions, the simple structure, lack of bureaucracy, the relentless performance culture that increases profit per ton of finished steel. Technology was part of the Nucor equation, but a secondary part. One Nucor executive summed up, 20% of our business is the new technology that we embrace, but 80% of our success is in the culture of our company. You could have given the exact same technology at the exact same time to any number of companies with the exact same resources as Nucor, and even still, they would have failed to deliver Nucor's results. Like the Daytona 500, the primary variable in winning is not the car, but the driver and his team. Not that the car is unimportant, but the car is secondary. Mediocrity results first and foremost from management failure, not technological failure. Bethlehem Steel's difficulties had less to do with the mini-mill technology and more to do with its history of adversarial labor relations, which ultimately had its roots in unenlightened and ineffective management. Bethlehem had already begun its long slide before Nucor and the other mini-mills had taken significant market share. In fact, by the time Nucor made its technological breakthrough with continuous thin slab casting in 1986, Bethlehem had already lost more than 80% of its value relative to the market. This is not to say that technology played no role in Bethlehem's demise. Technology did play a role, and ultimately a significant one. But technology's role was as an accelerator of Bethlehem's demise, not the cause. Again, it's the same principle at work. Technology as an accelerator, not a cause. Only in this comparison case, the principle operates in reverse. When we examined the comparison companies, we did not find a single example of a comparison company's demise coming primarily from a technology torpedo that blew it out of the water. Not one. R.J. Reynolds lost its position as the number one tobacco company in the world, not because of technology, but because RJR management thrashed about with undisciplined diversification and later went on a let's make management rich at the expense of the company buyout binge. A&P fell from the second largest company in America to irrelevance, not because it lagged behind Kroger in scanning technology, but because it lacked the discipline to confront the brutal facts of reality about the changing nature of grocery stores. The evidence from our study does not support the idea that technological change plays the principal role in the decline of once great companies or the perpetual mediocrity of others. Certainly technology is important. You can't remain a laggard and hope to be great. But technology by itself is never a primary cause of either greatness or decline. Throughout business history, early technology pioneers rarely prevail in the end. VisiCalc, for example, was the first major personal computer spreadsheet. Where is VisiCalc today? Do you know anyone who uses it? And what of the company that pioneered it? Gone. Doesn't even exist. VisiCalc eventually lost out to Lotus 1-2-3, which itself lost out to Excel. Lotus then went into a tailspin, saved only by selling out to IBM. The first portable computers came from now dead companies such as Osborne Computers. Today, we primarily use portables from companies such as Dell and Sony. This pattern of the second or third or fourth follower prevailing over the early trailblazers shows up through the entire history of technological and economic change. IBM did not have the early lead in computers. It lagged so far behind Remington Rand, which had the UNIVAC, the first commercially successful large-scale computer, that people called IBM's first computer IBM's UNIVAC. Boeing did not pioneer the commercial jet. De Havilland did, with the Comet, but lost ground when one of its early jets exploded in midair. Not exactly a good brand-building moment. Boeing, slower to market, invested in making the safest, most reliable jets and dominated the airways for over 3 decades. I could go on for pages. GE did not pioneer the AC electrical system. Westinghouse did. Palm Computing did not pioneer the personal digital assistant. Apple did with its high-profile Newton. AOL did not pioneer the consumer internet community. CompuServe, Prodigy, they did. We could make a long list of companies that were technology leaders, but that failed to prevail in the end as great companies. It would be a fascinating list in itself, but all the examples would underscore a basic truth. Technology cannot turn a good company into a great one, nor by itself prevent disaster. History teaches this lesson repeatedly. Consider the United States debacle in Vietnam. The United States had the most technologically advanced fighting force the world has ever known. Super fighter jets, helicopter gunships, advanced weapons, computers, sophisticated communications, miles of high-tech border sensors. Indeed, the reliance on technology created a false sense of invulnerability. The Americans lacked not technology, but a simple and coherent concept for the war, on which to attach that technology. It lurched back and forth across a variety of ineffective strategies, never getting the upper hand. Meanwhile, the technologically inferior North Vietnamese forces adhered to a simple, coherent concept: a guerrilla war of attrition, aimed at methodically wearing down public support for the war at home. What little technology the North Vietnamese did employ, such as the AK-47 rifle, much more reliable and easier to maintain in the field than the complicated M16, linked directly to that simple concept. And in the end, as you know, the United States, despite all its technological sophistication, did not succeed in Vietnam. If you ever find yourself thinking that technology alone holds the key to success, then think again of Vietnam. Thoughtless reliance on technology is a liability, not an asset. Yes, when used right, when linked to a simple, clear, and coherent concept rooted in deep understanding, technology is an essential driver in accelerating forward momentum. But when used wrong, when grasped as an easy solution without deep understanding of how it links to a clear and coherent concept, technology simply accelerates your own self-created demise. Technology and the fear of being left behind. The research team ferociously debated whether this topic merited its own chapter. "There must be a technology chapter," said Scott Jones. "We're bombarded by the importance of technology these days at the business school. If we don't address it, we'll leave a huge hole in the book." "But it seems to me," countered Brian Larson, "that our technology finding is not just a special case of disciplined action. It belongs in the previous chapter. Disciplined action means staying within the 3 circles. That's the essence of the technology finding." "True, but it's a very special case," pointed out Scott Cederberg. "Every one of the companies became extreme pioneers in the application of technology long before the rest of the world became technology obsessed. I think it needs to be in there." "But compared to the other findings like Level 5, the Hedgehog concept, First 2, technology just feels like a much smaller issue," responded Amber Young. "I agree with Brian. Technology is important, but as a subset of discipline, or perhaps the flywheel, but not a concept on its own." We argued throughout the summer. Then Chris Jones, in her typically quiet and thoughtful way, asked a key question. Why? Why did the good to great companies maintain such a balanced perspective on technology, when most companies become reactionary, lurching and running about like Chicken Little, as we're seeing with the internet? Why indeed? Chris's question led us to an essential difference between great companies and good companies, a difference that has ultimately, at least in my mind, tipped the balance of including this chapter. If you had the opportunity to sit down and read all 2,000 plus pages of transcripts from the good to great interviews, you'd be struck by the utter absence of talk about competitive strategy. Yes, they did talk about strategy, and they did talk about performance, and they did talk about becoming the best, and they even talked about winning. But they never talked in reactionary terms, and never defined their strategies principally in response to what others were doing. They talked in terms of what they were trying to create and how they were trying to improve relative to an absolute standard of excellence. When we asked George Harvey to describe his motivation for bringing change to Pitney Bowes in the 1980s, he said, "I've always wanted to see Pitney Bowes as a great company. Let's start with that, all right? Let's just start there. That's a given. It needs no justification or explanation. We're not there today. We won't be there tomorrow. There is always so much more to create for greatness in an ever-changing world." Or, as Wayne Sanders summed up about the ethos that came to typify the inner workings of Kimberly-Clark, "We're just never satisfied. We can be delighted, but never satisfied." Those who built the good to great companies weren't motivated by fear. They weren't driven by fear of what they didn't understand. They weren't driven by fear of looking like a chump. They weren't driven by fear of watching others hit it big while they didn't. They weren't driven by the fear of being hammered by the competition. Those who turn good into great are motivated by a deep creative urge and an inner compulsion for sheer, unadulterated excellence for its own sake. Those who build and perpetuate mediocrity, in contrast, are more motivated by fear, the fear of being left behind. Never was there a better example of this difference than during the technology bubble of the late 1990s, which happened to take place right smack in the middle of the research on good to great. It served as an almost perfect stage to watch the difference between great and good play itself out, as the great ones responded like Walgreens, with calm equanimity and quiet, deliberate steps forward. Well, the mediocre ones, they lurched about in fearful, frantic, Chicken Little reaction. The big point of this chapter is not about technology per se. No technology, no matter how amazing, not computers, not telecommunications, not robotics, not the internet, can by itself ignite a shift from good to great. No technology can make you level 5. No technology can turn the wrong people into the right people. No technology can instill the discipline to confront the brutal facts. No technology can instill unwavering faith. No technology can supplant the need for deep understanding of the 3 circles. No technology can drive you to that simple crystalline understanding of a hedgehog concept. No technology can create a culture of discipline. No technology can instill the simple inner belief that leaving unrealized potential on the table, letting something remain good when it can become great, is a secular sin. Those that stay true to these fundamentals and maintain their balance even in times of great change and disruption will accumulate the momentum that creates breakthrough momentum. Those that do not, those that fall into reactionary lurching about, will spiral downward and remain mediocre. This is the big picture difference between great and good. The gestalt of the whole study, captured in the metaphor of the flywheel versus the doom loop. And it is to that overarching contrast that we will turn in the next chapter. Chapter summary: Technology Accelerators. The good to great organizations think differently about technology and technological change than mediocre ones. Good to great companies avoid technology fads and bandwagons, yet, paradoxically, they also become pioneers in the application of carefully selected technology. The key question about any technology is, does the technology fit directly with your hedgehog concept? If yes, then you need to become a pioneer in the application of that technology. If no, then you can settle for parity, or perhaps even ignore it entirely. The good to great companies use technology as an accelerator of momentum, not a creator of momentum. None of the good to great companies began their transformations with pioneering technology. Yet they all became pioneers in the application of technology once they grasped how it fit with the three circles and after they'd hit breakthrough. You could have taken the exact same leading-edge technologies pioneered at the good to great companies and handed them to the comparison companies for free. Here, have it, you have it, take it. And the comparison companies still would have failed to produce the same results. How a company reacts to technological change is a good indicator of its inner drive for greatness. Great companies respond with thoughtfulness and creativity, driven by that productive neurosis, a compulsion to turn unrealized potential into results. Mediocre companies react and lurch about, motivated by the fear of being left behind. Some unexpected findings. The whole idea that technological change is the principal cause in the decline of once great companies is simply not supported by the evidence. Certainly, a company can't remain a laggard and hope to be great, but technology by itself is never a primary root cause of either greatness or decline. Across 84 interviews with good to great executives, fully 80% didn't even bother to mention technology as one of the top 5 factors in the transformation. This is true even in companies famous for their pioneering application of technology, such as Nucor. And finally, crawl, walk, run can be a very effective approach, even and perhaps especially during times of rapid and radical technological change.